Joe Barry is gone. And instead of taking reactions to Joe Barry being gone, I wanted to look a little bit into Joe Barry as a coach and where the Packers need to find a better fit. Because if you recall, I think it was McCarthy that fired Dom Capers, who was kind of the founder of this 3-4 defense, one of the originals of it. And he fired him. And it was a fair case that the Packers, the way that Ted Thompson drafted, they usually would prefer to cycle out a veteran, even when they're hitting their second contract, and bring in a young player. Mm-hmm. And Dom Capers was someone that would want a game plan for each specific team and add wrinkles and add layers. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't marrying right because you had a D coordinator who didn't have players who could grasp the full concepts of the defense. They were still, for lack of a better word, they were at the 100 level every year. And maybe they got to the 200 level, but nobody could ever get to the 400 level. And that's really what made Dom Capers' defense work. Yep. Mike Pettin, I think, was closer to what Joe Barry is. Honestly, probably can make a case it was a mistake to fire Mike Pettin because similar results to Joe Barry. And Mike Pettin is a pretty proven defensive coordinator. These defensive coordinators, they're at the mercy of the talent. And I honestly think the biggest sin, if you want to call it that, with Joe Barry, and I know you talked about how this defense is designed to be up with the lead, and I don't know whose fault it is. Either Goody is not drafting the right players in the high rounds, or Barry is not developing them. Because, and there's injury, there's bad luck in here too. Because, look, Eric Stokes, even before he got hurt, he was already looked like his best season was his rookie season. And then he got hurt, and now that things are sideways, that's not fully on Goody or on Joe Barry there. But then you look at Quay Walker. He's still he's not an instinctual football player, and he didn't get a lot better at that. Yeah. I mean, he got marginally better because you play another year, but you have Wyatt, who's developing, but developing slowly. You have Van Ness developing, but developing slowly, maybe even out of position. And then you look at Rashawn Gary, who gets the pressures usually, but is, for what he's getting paid and what his draft status is, and I understand pressures matter a ton, and Bill Belichick said that, and that's a real thing. But to be an elite pass rusher, they get home. They get home. That's not been the case with Gary this year. Hopefully he bounces back 100% next year. But Kenny Clark is like the only guy in his defense Jair Alexander up and down physically and mentally this year. Savage and the safeties are a disaster. That's not Joe Barry's fault. So if you're thinking that the D coordinator is going to come in and fix everything, just looking at the personnel. Yeah. Chris, how much of the blame would you put, and maybe we can ask this question first, 844-770-3776, how much of the blame do you put on the Packers defense as their personnel over to Joe Barry? Is it more or less than 50%?
I say it's more than 50%. The reason why I say that is because, this is how it works. It's just like when you get a 5-star recruit. If you're a first-round draft pick, your floor is supposed to be borderline all-pro, Pro Bowl player. That's supposed to be your floor. When you think about those top round draft picks, those dudes are making an immediate impact. And then there's marginal gains, and then they usually make a big jump after year 2 or 3. I wouldn't, in the NFL, not much of your development, you don't really develop too much more. You really don't develop too much more. You learn a little more in football, and you can be in a scheme that might shine on you what you do better. Yes, that is true. I don't know if, just as a quick example, Quay Walker, say he's just a way better blitzing linebacker. He's just somebody that you got to keep getting downhill. Just let him keep going. Then a scheme might help that shine a little more, but at the end of the day, it's you're going to have opportunities in every scheme to go blitz. Or like Van Ness, you're drafted in the first round because either you're an athletic freak, your body's ready to go, you can be a game changer right now. And I just think for the Packers, on the defensive side of the ball, that hasn't panned out. That really hasn't been the case. I don't know if – because some people have different approaches, though, to the draft. Usually in the first round, typically it's just best player. I'm just taking the best player. Unless you're a team that's your playoff contention year in, year out.
Goody has a type, I think you could say, defensively.
Oh, yeah.
He likes athleticism more than proven stats and proven production. Because Rashawn Gary I think he was the number 1 overall recruit coming out of high school, went to Michigan. Not productive, matching the physicality of Rashawn Gary. They brought him in. He's look, he is a good NFL player.
Yeah.
But he's now 26. He will turn, I don't know when he turns 27, but he's 26 years old. He's been in the league for 5 full seasons. Last year he got hurt, but he's never had double-digit sacks. And that's not the whole number. That's not the whole thing. But when I give you the sack leaders, these are the guys you talk about every year. TJ Watt, and he's at 19. Trey Hendrickson, 17.5. Josh Allen, 17.5. Khalil Mack, we've been talking about him forever, 17. Daniel Hunter, 16.5. Max Crosby, 14.5. Myles Garrett, 14. Parson, 14. Montez Sweat, 12.5. These players are there. Aiden Hutchinson, 11.5. They're there every year. And Montez Sweat, for an example, plays in a defense where he is the D end, and he has run responsibilities. I mean, obviously, Rashawn has more than just pass rush, but he gets to pin his ears back a lot.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Rashawn Gary, I assume a bounce back year with a fully healthy year. But just as an example, that he was top 15, I believe, and you're looking for TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson numbers out of him, and hopefully he gets there. And I don't know if that's Joe Barry not using them right. I don't know if that's Rashawn Gary just, again, when you pick someone that's more athleticism and paper than production, you run the risk of you don't know what their ceiling is. Lucas Van Ness never started at Iowa, and he had a fine rookie, but 2 out of his 4 sacks came against the Bears, and so, and I'm not saying that doesn't matter as much, but he literally just getting ran free on some of these sacks. So you have to take all this into account, and maybe he will climb up as well, but he might be out of position, and then you have Walker and Wyatt, and maybe it's all on Joe Barry, but what we're going to find out now is that was that on Joe Barry, or should Goody be focusing more on drafting guys who actually make plays?
Yeah, I mean, that's like an issue throughout the entire NFL, and I even talked to my brother about that, is that some teams take the approach of, so the thought is I get this athletic genetic freak or whatever, just like in high school. I get this dude, his bodies can handle an NFL season, like he's ready to do that, and he's an athletic freak. He's got something I can't coach. I can't coach that first step that he has, whatever it is. I can't coach it. So you take him in the thought of, oh man, if we get him around NFL coaches, like he's gonna blow up.
Right.
But you overlook the guy that's, I don't know, maybe he's an inch or two shorter and maybe he's fat. I don't know. Maybe he's just slow or something.
Yep.
But in college, this dude had 20 sacks. Like, bro, he had 20 sacks on a Power 5 conference. Like, he's going to be a good player.
Right. When I think the best talent evaluators kind of balance it out.
Yes,
of like, hey,
there is a balance.
Because those guys you could get a little bit later.
Yes.
And I think Goody's done a better job, but he doesn't stack positions. Like, if you look at it, the later picks are a little bit more of production. I mean, Musgrave was a little bit of that's more of a projection, but he was injured a lot, and obviously it worked out. But Watson was a little bit of a projection, but that's a second-round pick, and I don't know if that's worked. Actually, that hasn't worked out as a second-round pick. Musgrave has worked out where he was picked, but then you start like I think the smart GMs try to take players who are a mix of talent at the top, and sometimes you got to pick guys who are just guaranteed production, or at least as much as you can be. The Adam Madison chimes in. All I ask for in a DC is how they know how to utilize their personnel and has to get the best out of their abilities. Who can put a good defense on the field every week, not just after the fan base call for him to be fired. The Adam Madison. There's literally no effect on the fan base or anyone being mad at Joe Barry as far as the effect the defense is putting out there. But I do think, and this is what we want to ask, 844-770-3776, you can chime in on this. How much blame does the Packers' defensive personnel deserve for Joe Barry's firing? 844-770-3776. Are we posting it as over 50% and under 50%, or how are we doing it?
That is how I posted the poll so far. I posted it about 2 minutes ago, and so far we have 20 votes. So far, 35% saying more than 50% does the Packers' personnel deserve for Joe Barry's firing, and then 65% saying less than 50%.
Here's the thing. This is what I'll say. Like, yes, there's like a partnership between your coordinator and your players. But at the end of the day, it's like if you're a first-round edge rusher, like you should be able to just flat out beat some of these tackles. Like you're supposed to just win. If I have you rushing, you're supposed to just win. If you're a first-round corner and I put you in man-to-man, you're supposed to be able to lock up some of these elite receivers. You're a first-round linebacker. Like, I shouldn't have to be talking about where you fit in the run and wrapping up and tackling some of these guys or just being a playmaker. First rounders are playmakers. They're guaranteed bona fide playmakers, and I think you see that across every draft, and that's why those dudes go that high. But Yeah. It's just not as simple as, oh, you got to use these guys better, because we would see some type of production if they weren't being used right. We still see the flashes and the plays.
Well, and to your point, and you've talked about this before, and we saw it in the 49ers game, you need your playmakers to make plays.
Yeah.
And that's what Joe Barry can't do.
Yeah.
And I know that Prime has an issue with the D coordinator that we'll talk about on the other side. And I want to see how much of that is coordinator, how much of that is needing veterans. That's what I want to ask about this player side of
That
things.
too, yeah.
And also, the most predictable thing out here, Chris, is this poll continues to come in. Of course, if you're a Packers fan or a fan of any team,
You're going to say
you're going to blame the coach because you can't be the players. You just fix the coach and everything's fixed, Chris. That's how it works all the time. I'm in that Chicago right now. They got a new offensive coordinator. Offense is going to work.
gonna fire.
It's never worked ever. And the Packers are now on 3 defensive coordinators in 4 years. But, hey, it's always the coach.
Felt like Green Bay to me.
I'm just as guilty of it as anyone else right now. 58% of you say the personnel deserves less than 50% of the blame. 58% of you say that.